Mi de sho piwi na win de magid, guys, you say, guys, you did jika gade gi on a schnabe babamizo na au, gidu gima quemena na au mandamination a kazut. We will now hear the State of the Band address by the Honorable Chief Executive Melanie Benjamin.
Buju Anin Anishinaabe Duk, Mino Gijigad Nugum, Mandaman Indigenous Cause, Melanie Benjamin Indigo. Good morning, Mr. Speaker, members of the Band Assembly, Madam Chief Justice, and members of the court, and most important, fellow members of the non-removable Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. I am honored to speak to you today on the State of the Band. 1 year ago, this room was filled with nearly 1,000 band members who came to hear about the State of the Band, reunite with old friends, and enjoy a wonderful community meal together. While I was standing at this podium and looking into the audience, I saw a sea of beautiful Anishinaabe faces. The sound of coffee cups, of crying babies, of little children who have been trying to sit quietly. Those sounds have been the background music to all 14 State of the Band addresses I have given. Today, I miss those sounds. Last year at the State of the Band, we sat close to each other. It was a day of a lot of hugs, new babies, of shared food, and especially shared desserts. And we laughed and talked to one another up close without worry. Today, I am really missing those things. Last January, we did not know that less than 3 months later, we would be in a community lockdown. The doors to our casinos and businesses closed, school buildings closed, the government building locked due to a global pandemic. This year, the State of the Band is very different as we come to you online in order to protect the health and safety of our band community. But some things will never change, including how we begin this day in our traditional way. Miigwech to Obazan for speaking on our behalf, so we can begin in a good way. Miigwech to the ceremonial drum, Manidu Giwazans, Wabishki, Benes, Joe Nekwanebi, and George Morrow for bringing the ceremonial drum today. Miigwech to Mille Lacs all veterans for posting the flags, and to Arlen Sam, singers on the ceremonial drum, and Tori Petit for singing for us today. Like me, I know many of you miss getting together as a community, but COVID has not been able to stop us from being a community. There are people who worked hard to make sure we could broadcast this to your homes. It took a small army to make this day happen. To each of you, miigwech for your hard work. There is no getting around the fact that 2020 was a very rough year. COVID-19 has been vicious with too high of a cost. Band members lost loved ones to this disease. Many band members face job loss and financially insecurity, and as American Indianas, all of us had to cope with the fear and anxiety of being in the highest risk group for complications or loss of life from COVID-19. 2020 was a year of an ugly national election that nearly ripped our country apart. Just last week, we watched on TV as the US Capitol was attacked by domestic insurgents trying to overthrow the election and the government. And it was an MCT election year where we saw some of the ugliness of the national politics spill into our own band elections, which we must never allow to happen again. And if that wasn't enough, it was also a year of fear, anger, anxiety, sparked by racism, with the social unrest felt around the world due to the murder of George Floyd in the middle of a pandemic. Finally, COVID has caused loss of life in other ways. Addictions and mental illness became worse with social isolation. Depression in the United States has tripled since COVID and is higher in communities of color. When people have trouble coping with sadness, isolation, and anxiety, they may turn to drugs and alcohol. Depression also makes other chronic illnesses like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer worse and harder to treat. Sadly, we have seen all of this firsthand. The number of band members who have passed away this year is double from the previous year. Hearts are broken from the loss of life and so many funerals. It is important to acknowledge that there is a great sadness in our community right now. If you are a loved one and you know others that are suffering from depression, we have help available. There are phone numbers listed here. Please call them if you are struggling. Every band member's life is a gift, and your families need you. During 2020, some of the worst things we could imagine happened, but in many ways, it brought out the best in us we could ever hope for. Last year, I talked about something that Joe Naquanavy Sr. said. He said we should all try to be good ancestors. During one of the darkest times in our modern history, many Mille Lacs Band members did just that. They became the light in the darkness, being the best ancestors they could. I've heard 2020 described as a dumpster fire, but 2020 was also a year when small sparks together lit a great fire of community service, of fighting injustice, and adapting to a new world. As band members and employees, you step forward to serve our band with courage and compassion, risking your own safety to protect others. Together, we did not cower in the crisis of this pandemic. We faced it head on, and we fought it. We took decisive action and quickly changed the way we do nearly everything so that we could keep band members safe. On March 14, 2020, I issued an executive order to mobilize our Tribal Emergency Response Committee, which we call TERC. Our TERC included members from all three branches of government. They met around the clock, making sure that we could get help and basic government services to our band members. To slow down the virus, many difficult decisions had to be made. All employees who could perform their jobs from home were directed to stay away from government buildings. We continued to pay all employees as long as we could, but there came a time when we had no choice but to furlough many employees. We tried to time this with the federal government's expansion of unemployment benefits so that people would still have a source of income. But we know this has been a period of great stress for our furloughed workers. I want to acknowledge your sacrifice for our band as well. While many band members and services went online, like education, telehealth, and nearly all our business functions and meetings, there were still services and help that band members needed that could only be provided in person, so those employees were asked to remain working. With careful planning, the TERC found the safest way for our frontline workers to continue providing those services to band members in person. This included housing staff who continued going into homes to assist band members during the pandemic. Our education staff and teachers also continued to care for and teach our children when in-person education was in place again. Our healthcare and wellness providers and staff, public health staff, and maintenance crews all across the districts are employees who returned to work after the casinos reopened so we could begin our economic recovery. And our OMB staff, because we still needed to pay the bills and get paychecks out. All of you sacrificed for our band, sometimes at a great personal cost, especially those who became sick while working. I also want to acknowledge our urban area staff led by Wabin Spears. After the murder of George Floyd, there was civil unrest like we have never seen before. While a new civil rights movement was born from millions of peaceful protesters, the actions of a few created destruction. The world watched as South Minneapolis seemed to be burning down, very close to our urban community near Franklin Avenue. With COVID-19, Wabin and her staff had to deal with two crises at the same time, and they did it well. They coordinated with the Turk to make sure that band members received food and supplies when all the stores were closed, and that band members could get their medications when there was no public transportation. Band members like Colin Cash and Randall Sam answered the call, driving to Minneapolis from the reservation to assist with protecting the community, watching over our Woodlands National Bank, tribal offices, businesses, and housing, all in the middle of a global pandemic. To our frontline workers and band members who risk your own health and safety to ensure the basic needs of our band members were met, to all in our community who sacrificed during the pandemic. You are all heroes for our band. Miigwech for your bravery, generosity, dedication, and service. I also want to acknowledge and thank our dedicated members of the Band Assembly for your important legislative work and your strong partnership in getting through the crisis. Our emergency response would not have been possible without your great work. And Chi Miigwech to Speaker Sheldon Boyd for his strong, decisive leadership during this crisis. With Sheldon Boyd in charge, our legislative branch worked harder than I have ever seen. When our casinos closed and there were no funds for per capita, Speaker Boyd laid the course for providing much-needed economic assistance to band members. At the same time, he did a brilliant job managing our financing and preserving long-term savings so that future generations will always have resources for another crisis if needed. Speaker Boyd leads with integrity, compassion, and he lives our Anishinaabe values. It has been my privilege to work with him. I also want all band members to know that our division of powers government was the main reason we were able to respond so quickly. Together as a government, I think we had the best crisis response team in Indian country, and that is just not my opinion. Throughout COVID, we were contacted by other tribes asking for advice, wanting to know how they could replicate what we were doing. Federal and state officials commented that we were better prepared for a crisis than most cities and counties. For that, I want to acknowledge everyone on our Turk committee. I also want to give a big miigwech to Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. When the virus hit and the state was about to shut down, tribal leaders were among the first people the governor contacted. Daily phone calls with tribal leaders were held to brief us on the crisis and to coordinate with our team. The governor and the lieutenant governor also get emergency assistance to tribes in Minnesota. No other states offered as much help to tribes as Minnesota did. We will always be grateful to our state leaders for standing by us. Despite the challenges of 2020, we did not let COVID stop us from making progress. Some exciting things happened this year. For example, after taking inconsistent positions on the status of our reservation in recent years, the state of Minnesota made it clear in early February of 2020 that our reservation was never disestablished and has since reaffirmed that position. Miigwech to Attorney General Keith Ellison and Governor Walz for joining with the federal government's position that our reservation boundary never ceased to exist. Mille Lacs County still refuses to acknowledge the existence of our reservation, even though it has never been able to show how the county is harmed by the reservation. The issue will be argued in federal court in March of 2021, and we may get a ruling by the end of the year. Our historical language revitalization project got off the ground in 2020. With help from Rosetta Stone, we're making tools and resources that many generations will be able to use. We are also creating books to build our library of Ojibwe language resources. By raising children who are fluent, we are exercising our sovereignty. We're making sure our future generations can think, act, live like Anishinaabe people with Anishinaabe values. This project will protect our language forever, promising that future generations will always be able to learn Ojibwe. In 2020, we also opened our new healthcare center, a state-of-the-art facility where band members can get health and wellness services. The move was very difficult due to the pandemic, but we did it. We purchased property in Minneapolis across from the All Nations Church, where we will be building new housing in a multi-use building that will include a community gathering places for band members. Miigwech to our urban area planning committee members who are advising us on the design. We are just one of the 2 tribes in Minnesota that received a special eagle permit, which removes the challenges that make it hard to obtain eagle feathers. Band members now have a much more fair and consistent process when eagle feathers are needed. We continued our legal battle to protect our lands and waters from a new pipeline through the courts, which is a proper role of government. Individuals worked at the grassroots level. And on the economic development front, we have some very big news. The U.S. Small Business Administration has a special program called 8A Certification Program. This is for businesses owned by women, minority groups, and tribes. Businesses that get this 8A status can receive preferential treatment for government contracting. In March, 4 of our global companies called Muckwa Global, in March, 4 of our Muckwa Global companies were accepted into the 8A program. This is a very big deal. In just the past few months, Muckwa Global has landed several government contracts around the world that are very exciting. For example, our band is now assisting the U.S. Department with its counterterrorism training needs. Through another contract, we are working with the U.S. State Department on a construction project overseas at a secure location that cannot be disclosed. Who have ever thought that this was possible? It always has been our goal to diversify so that we are not dependent on gaming. For 3 months last summer, when our casinos were closed, we experienced the hardship that the loss of gaming would mean. With this new source of income coming from government contracting, we are on a path to long-term economic security, even if there is another pandemic. This is history making. On another historical front, next week on Wednesday, January 20th, President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be sworn in as the 46th President and Vice President of these United States. This is a profound moment in history because on that day, we will have the first woman Vice President. We are witnessing another glass ceiling being shattered forever by Kamala Harris. To anyone who has a young daughter, a granddaughter, or niece in your homes, there is one thing I ask you to do on that day. Make certain your TV is on a channel showing the inauguration. We need all our little girls to watch this historical event so they know their dreams, no matter how big, can come true. I am confident in the Biden administration. President-elect Biden's plan for tribal nations is the strongest I have ever seen by any president. It is based on tribal sovereignty and respect for tribal governments. President-elect Biden has made history for us in another way as well. During the campaign, he promised that if he won his election, his cabinet would look like America and be the most diverse cabinet in history. He has already made good on that promise in a big way by nominating Congresswoman Deb Haaland to the position of Secretary of Interior. We may have the first American Indian ever to serve on a president's cabinet in one of the most powerful positions in the country for Indian tribes. The department reach goes far beyond the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Indian Education. Every day, decisions are made or actions taken across the whole department that affect us. This includes protecting our trust lands, our economic development, our sovereignty, law enforcement, and public safety. Our treaty rights, access to clean water, our food security, management of our trust funds, protection of wildlife, plants, fish, and even our religious freedom. The Secretary of Interior is supposed to be our trustee, yet throughout most of the past 170 years, the trustee has overseen the exploitation of our lands and people. This will not happen with the new administration if Congresswoman Holland is confirmed. A highly qualified Indian woman will be serving in a position who already knows our needs, who understands tribal sovereignty, because she is one of us. Finally, despite the division that a few people tried to create, our MCT elections proved that our tribal democracy works. On that note, I want to thank band members for giving me the honor of serving as your chief executive for another term of office. I am very humbled by your support, and I intend to see through every commitment I made during the campaign. My goal is that 4 years from now, we will look back on the post-pandemic years as being a time of growth and prosperity for every band member. I know we can do this if we keep working together in the way we have in the past year. Now is a time for unity. As we begin this new year, many have asked, when will the world return to normal? That depends on what normal means. All of us have been impacted by this pandemic. We have all changed in some way. Things can never go back to the way they were, but that does not have to be a bad thing. Our future can be better than before the pandemic. If we move safely and continue to be smart, we can reemerge as the community we want to be and know we can be. We can get through this pandemic together because we are resilient. We are already on the path of coming out stronger than before. Out of fear and uncertainty, many band members and employees shined. They showed courage and determination, using creative problem solving to meet our challenges. It has been a long time since our band has to deal with food insecurity. But COVID-19 put up new roadblocks that made it harder to get nutritious food, especially for elders and people in high-risk groups, families with young children, and those who lost their work income. When our children could no longer get their meals at school, our government and corporate commission devised a plan to get meals to the kids at home. After the casinos closed, our food and beverage staff switched from serving guests to serving our band communities almost overnight. Thousands of meals were made every day for the band and the area school children. Weeks worth of food for elders was put together, and our highest risk people were able to receive basic food supplies so they could not have to risk going to stores. I want to thank a couple of people in my office, Julie Skinaway and Roberta Martin, who helped elders get groceries in District 2 and District 3. Across the band, teams of people were organized to distribute food in each district and the urban area. This took hundreds of people, and we did it. We were successful in getting a special grant of nearly $1 million to provide housing assistance. 478 band families received help through this grant. On that note, miigwech to Brittany Wind and our grants department. The band received every single COVID grant that we applied for. Individual band members also got creative. When the whole county was out of medical masks, art ladies went to work sewing masks for band members. Some even taught other band members how to sew their own masks. Miigwech to Temperance McLean, Carol Hernandez, our ALU residents, and many others who saw a community need and took care of it. Band members put our Anishinaabe values into actions by taking care of one another, checking on elders, delivering food to those in need, and helping neighbors. Getting through this pandemic is not a sprint, it is a marathon. Resilience is not about avoiding the winds of crisis. It is about facing and walking through the storm with courage and coming out stronger than ever. This is who we are and what we do. We have that in common with other American Indians, but also with indigenous people all around the world. International researchers who study resilience came up with 6 things that seem to get indigenous societies around the world through the hardest times: our elders, our identity, our language, our ceremony and traditions, our spirituality, and our sense of humor. Of course, we already knew all of that at Mille Lacs, but the past year has proven our need to respect and protect these things. Our ability to survive every crisis the world has ever thrown our way is built into our culture and makes us all Anishinaabe. These are the traits that will get us through a pandemic, and we will come out stronger than ever before. As we go through this new year, I hope we will focus on strengthening, sharing, and supporting all of the things that make us Anishinaabe resilient. One of the many lessons I learned this past year is that most people don't like to watch long video messages. So rather than go through each department, I've asked the commissioners to provide a short video about their area in more detail. This way you can learn more about our achievements and challenges from the last year, as well as goals for 2021, directly from the experts who run these areas. I encourage you to watch these videos following this address. But I do have a few directives for commissioners I do want to mention today. To the Commissioner of Administration, Bobby Tao Boyd, with the list of so many of our fluent speakers, we are facing cultural state of emergency. When an indigenous community loses their language, it is called language death. This has happened to countless tribes in the United States. Our younger people who are second learner speakers are very worried that unless we take big steps now, our band could experience language death. If this happens, our identity and survival is at risk, because it is only through our language that we conduct our ceremonies and continue our traditions that make us Anishinaabe. Ojibwe language is a gift we've been given from the Manidoog to communicate with the natural world, the animals, the plants, and one another. There is a meaning built into our language that guides us how to treat one another. It is through the language that our ancestors were able to survive. Our ancestors lived through a time called the termination era, when federal policies tried to terminate our Indianness. Federal officials made it a crime for us to conduct our ceremonies. They sent our children to boarding schools and forbid them from speaking our language. But our ancestors didn't allow this. They fought back. This is our time to fight back. What we have found out is that we need a good, comprehensive plan to achieve recovery of our language. The good news is that we are on the path. Commissioner Bobby Tao Boyd, we need focused leadership working on this project. I hereby direct you to make a leadership plan so this can happen. Chief Executive Art Gabo had a dream that one day Ojibwe would be spoken throughout the government center. This can happen if we do it right. Also, our personnel policies must be updated. Currently, they do not reflect the culture of the band. I further direct you to work with other commissioners to get this done within 3 months. To the Assistant Commissioner of Administration, Peter Nekwanebi, I hereby direct you to continue working to get band members into our homes and convert rentals to home ownership. I further direct you to work on a veterans housing project as a 2021 priority. Every veteran who served our country should be guaranteed housing on band lands. To the Commissioner of Health and Human Services, Nicole Anderson, you and your staff had done an outstanding job this year protecting our community. You still have your work cut out for you with COVID-19. Continue rolling out of the vaccine until every band member who wants a vaccine gets one. To the Commissioner of Natural Resources, Katie Draper, I direct you to focus attention on reorganizing our enrollments department. For band member parents, the most important service our band provides is ensuring that their children who are eligible to get enrolled. We know from history that many mistakes were made in blood quantum, some going back as far as 150 years. With new data coming from the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, we have to revamp our entire process. I will also be holding public hearings in 2021 on enrollment to include band members' input in the process. To the Commissioner of Education, Joy Shingleby, your directive for 2020 is to get a history program developed for every grade that focuses on our band. By the time our students graduate, they should have a deep knowledge about our history, including our division of powers government, the meaning of tribal sovereignty and self-governance, and they should understand exactly how our band government works. To the Commissioner of Corporate Affairs, Joseph Nakewa-Nabies, I hereby direct you to train as many band members as possible to participate in Muckwa Global Ventures. We are in the beginning stages of a new revenue stream, but we need band members' jobs to come from these ventures as well. To Solicitor General Caleb Dog Eagle, I direct you to work with tribal police and federal, state, and other tribal agencies on a drug-free zone plan for all 3 districts. Also, I direct you to improve communications between OSG, law enforcement, and band members, so our community is well informed. I also have 2 directives for all commissioners. Last year, we brought in our first Solicitor General, Jay Canasatega, to provide training to our elected officials and commissioners about the creation of our Division of Powers government. This was a transformative experience for all who went through the training. People who had only heard stories about how our elders planned our current system of government left with the understanding of the cultural reason for our 3-branch government. They gained new knowledge about the connection between our Anishinaabe identity and the way our government was intended to serve band members. In 2021, I direct you all to create a plan that provides this training to any band member who wants to learn more about our history. Our history is our birthright, and all band members should have access to this important part of our identity. Second, 2020 has taught us that it is time for all communities and businesses in America to have real conversations about racism, inclusion, and respect for other cultures. Our employees especially need to understand how our elders are to be treated. I direct commissioners to work as a team to develop one cultural sensitivity training for all government and casino employees. The training will be guided by our elders and inclusion experts and will strengthen our entire community. Some days, even in a long and dark winter, there is a very bright sunrise streaming through the clouds that lights up the skies, the snow, and frozen earth. Today, there are rays of hope in our future. We have been through one of the worst years in modern history. The whole world has, but we know there are better times coming. Where do we find the strength and hope to move on? I have hope that the Biden-Harris administration will reverse the policies that hurt Indian country and restore policies meant to protect our lands and our resources, especially slowing down climate change. I have hope that the new administration will bring justice back to the Justice Department and that the Indian Health Service will finally receive more funding as we recover from the pandemic. I see hope in our ability to win legal battle about our reservation boundary. I see hope in economic recovery. I see hope in science and medicine and the vaccines that have been developed in record time. The world will soon be safer again. Mille Lacs Band members are people of great strength. So many times before in our history, we have stood our ground. In 1855, we were promised a permanent home. We were told we could stay here for 1,000 years and longer. In 1863, they tried to move us, and again in the 1880s. At that time, Shabashkang asked the federal negotiators, "Is the 1,000 years up that the great father sent you here?" Shabashkang would not be moved. And still today, we are the non-removables. Almost 100 years ago, our ancestors were fighting another global pandemic, the Spanish flu. The first jingle dress was created here in Mille Lacs to help heal the sick during that time. Our ancestors met the disease with our resolve, our medicine, and our prayers. Our community survived. The character that was passed down to us by our ancestors, the strength, determination, stamina, and grit, the resilience is the greatest gift they passed on to us. Their blood, the blood of warriors, runs through our veins. The will to face down any opponent, stand our ground, and fight is within us, but especially the ability to get up and fight another day, the ability to rise to any challenge and then rise again. Our Anishinaabe values, our compassion for others, and our resilience will show the world how to get through a crisis. History is not something that fate decides. History is made by people of vision and courage. We have plenty of both. When our history is written, future band members will define us not by how we suffer through tragedy, but how we persevere despite tragedy. And when socially distanced, we are still united by our blood, by our history, our culture, and our values. In future years, we will tell our grandchildren about the time, about how we met this challenge, and how we did not just survive, we came out stronger and more unified. And so, even after the most difficult year many of us have ever known, the state of the band is still sound and strong. The strength comes from you. If there is one thing we have proven, is that no virus can stop us as a band or take away our spirit. Despite what we have lost, despite the grief and hardship, we will be stronger and more determined because of this. We owe that to our ancestors and to future generations. We are Anishinaabe strong, but we also are Anishinaabe resilient, and we always make a comeback. I wish all of you the best in 2021. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Madam Chief. Right now, we'll call a recess for band assembly, and we'll continue the session across the street. Are you coming up? Okay. Before I go, I'd like to remember one more staff member, Deanna Sam from Department of Motor Vehicles. She's also one of the core staff of the legislative branch. Don't want to forget anybody.